The empath never repeats a lesson by accident. The soul repeats what the mind refuses to touch. That's why the same faces keep arriving in different bodies. The same abandonment wearing new eyes. The same disappointment dressed as hope. Carl Jung once whispered that what remains unconscious returns as fate. And the empath feels this more deeply than anyone. Because every trigger is not only pain, it is memory trying to become truth. You call it another toxic person. But somewhere inside, an old wound quietly calls it home. The empath often believes love will heal what pain created. So you stay longer than your spirit can survive. You explain away coldness. You romanticize inconsistency. You carry people emotionally the way wounded children carry broken toys. But the lesson repeats because the universe is not asking you to save others. It is asking whether you finally know how to save yourself. And that realization feels almost cruel when your heart was trained to sacrifice before it was taught boundaries. There is a strange loneliness inside the empath. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of never fully being met. So you return to familiar emotional chaos because chaos feels recognizable. Silence feels suspicious. Healthy love feels too calm. The nervous system confuses peace with emptiness. And this is why the same emotional story loops like a dream you can't wake from. The soul is trying to teach the body that love was never supposed to hurt this much. The empath notices patterns long before others do. Tiny shifts in tone, eyes that suddenly grow distant, energy changing before words ever arrive. But here is the tragedy. You notice red flags and still stay. Not because you are weak, because deep inside, part of you still believes endurance will finally earn love. Jung believed we marry our unconscious wounds. The empath does this emotionally. You become attached to what mirrors the pain you have not yet healed. Some emotional lessons repeat because guilt keeps reopening the door. The empath feels responsible for everyone's suffering. You carry invisible emotional debts that were never yours to pay. So even after betrayal, you wonder if you were too sensitive. After neglect, you wonder if you expected too much. After disrespect, you search yourself instead of the wound they left behind. And the lesson repeats until one sacred moment arrives. The moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. There is a hidden addiction many empaths never talk about. Intensity, not peace, not stability. Intensity, the late-night emotional conversations, the unpredictability, the emotional highs after emotional starvation, the feeling of finally being chosen after being ignored. This creates trauma bonds that feel spiritual. But not every deep connection is destiny. Some are simply unhealed pain recognizing itself. The empath often mistakes understanding someone for being safe with them. You see their trauma, their sadness, their hidden inner child. And because you can see the wound, you forget to notice the weapon. This is why emotional lessons repeat. The empath keeps loving potential while reality quietly destroys peace. You wait for people to become who their soul could be, while ignoring who they consistently choose to be. Some lessons return because the empath still fears rejection more than suffering. Read that slowly. You tolerate emotional confusion because clarity risks loss. You accept crumbs because emptiness feels unbearable. You stay connected to people who drain your spirit because detachment feels like death to the nervous system. But every repeated lesson is really one question. Will you finally choose yourself before the world forces you to? The strange thing about healing is this. The lesson disappears the moment the pattern is no longer attractive to your unconscious mind. Suddenly, emotionally unavailable people feel exhausting instead of exciting. Suddenly, manipulation feels obvious instead of magnetic. Suddenly, your body reacts to disrespect before your heart creates excuses. This is when the empath changes timelines internally. Not through revenge, not through becoming cold, but through finally seeing clearly. And maybe that is the real reason emotional lessons repeat for empaths. Not punishment, preparation. Every heartbreak was trying to return you to yourself. Every trigger was revealing an invisible wound. Every painful cycle carried a hidden invitation. Wake up before your soul disappears inside other people's expectations. The empath was never meant to endlessly suffer for love. The empath was meant to become conscious through love. And once that happens, the old lessons stop knocking at the door. The empath keeps returning to emotionally unavailable people because somewhere in childhood, love itself felt emotionally unavailable. Affection came mixed with tension. Attention came mixed with unpredictability. So the nervous system learned a dangerous language. If love feels calm, it must not be real. And years later, the soul still searches for the missing ending to an old emotional story. The empath often carries invisible grief from all the times they silenced themselves just to keep peace. You swallowed emotions to avoid conflict. You dimmed intuition to avoid rejection. You pretended things were fine because honesty felt unsafe. But buried emotions do not disappear. They become emotional magnets. They quietly attract situations that force the truth back to the surface. Some emotional lessons repeat because the empath confuses being needed with being loved. There is a deep ache in feeling indispensable to someone. Creates purpose, identity, attachment. But relationships built on rescuing slowly consume the soul. One person keeps drowning. The other forgets how to breathe. The empath notices something strange during healing. The more self-aware you become, the harder certain people try to pull you back into old versions of yourself. Because healing changes emotional chemistry. You stop reacting the same way. You stop chasing closure. You stop begging for understanding. And this unsettles people who were comfortable feeding on your emotional availability. Sometimes the repeated lesson is not about love at all. Sometimes it is about worth. The empath keeps accepting less because deep inside, part of the soul still questions whether it deserves more. So you overgive to earn permanence. You overexplain to avoid abandonment. You overthink every shift in energy because your inner child still fears being left emotionally alone. Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden parts of the self buried beneath survival. And the empath's shadow is often anger. Not because you are cruel, because you were taught that anger makes you unlovable. So instead of expressing it, you internalized it, turned it inward, converted it into anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional self-betrayal. The lesson repeats until the empath learns that boundaries are sacred, not selfish. The empath often senses endings long before they arrive. You feel the emotional distance, the fading effort, the subtle coldness in someone's energy. But intuition becomes painful when the heart refuses to accept what the soul already knows. So you wait, and wait, and wait for people to return emotionally, while your spirit slowly abandons itself in the process. There are connections that enter the empath's life almost like spiritual mirrors, not to stay forever, but to expose hidden wounds. These people awaken abandonment fears, rejection wounds, insecurity, guilt, longing. Everything unresolved rises to the surface at once. The empath calls it a deep soul connection. But sometimes it is simply the universe refusing to let unconscious pain remain hidden any longer. The hardest emotional lesson for the empath is realizing that empathy does not guarantee reciprocity. You can understand someone deeply, and they can still hurt you carelessly. You can love someone honestly, and they can still choose themselves over your heart repeatedly. This realization changes the empath forever. Because eventually you stop asking, "Why can't they love me correctly?" and start asking, "Why do I keep choosing people who cannot?" And maybe the reason these lessons repeat is because the empath's awakening was never meant to happen intellectually. It had to be felt, lived, survived. The soul learns through emotional earthquakes, through patterns becoming unbearable, through heartbreak becoming impossible to romanticize, until one quiet day, the empath no longer chases what drains them, no longer confuses pain with destiny, no longer abandons inner peace for temporary connection. And that is the moment the cycle finally begins to break. The empath often carries relationships long after they have emotionally ended. Not because the connection is still alive, but because your heart keeps replaying who the person used to be. You mourn potential more than reality. You hold onto fragments of warmth like sacred evidence that the love was real. And this is why some lessons repeat. The empath struggles to let go of ghosts wearing familiar faces. There is a silent exhaustion that lives inside many empaths. The exhaustion of constantly reading between the lines, feeling everything unsaid, absorbing tension before words even form. You become emotionally hyper-aware because somewhere in life awareness became survival. And now your nervous system scans every room for emotional danger, even when love is present. Peace feels unfamiliar because chaos trained your senses first. The empath keeps revisiting painful dynamics because suffering became tied to identity. You became the understanding one, the patient one, the emotionally strong one. But identities can become prisons. And sometimes healing feels terrifying because you no longer know who you are without carrying everyone else emotionally. The soul asks a difficult question. Who are you when you stop rescuing others? Some people enter the empath's life almost like karmic storms. They awaken obsession, longing, confusion, emotional dependency. Nothing feels balanced around them. And still, the empath struggles to walk away. Because intensity creates illusion. The emotional roller coaster feels meaningful simply because it feels powerful. But true connection does not leave the soul in constant survival mode. The empath often mistakes emotional pain for depth. If it hurts deeply, it must matter deeply. If it consumes your thoughts, it must be destiny. But the unconscious mind becomes attached to what is unresolved. Not everything that haunts you is sacred. Some things haunt you because they wounded you, and wounds always beg for attention until they are healed consciously. There comes a moment when the empath realizes how often they apologized for having normal emotional needs, wanting consistency, wanting reassurance, wanting honesty, wanting softness. You were made to feel too much by people who benefited from giving too little. So the lesson repeats until you finally stop shrinking your soul to fit inside emotionally unavailable spaces. The empath feels energy before logic catches up. That is why your body often knows long before your mind accepts reality. The heaviness in the chest, the anxiety after conversations, the exhaustion around certain people. Your intuition whispers truth quietly, but trauma screams louder. And many empaths spend years ignoring inner wisdom because they were conditioned to doubt themselves emotionally. Sometimes repeated emotional lessons are actually repeated opportunities, not punishments, opportunities to respond differently. The same type of manipulator appears. The same emotional test returns. The same abandonment fear rises again. But this time, the empath pauses instead of chasing, observes instead of rescuing, leaves instead of over-explaining. And in that small shift, an entire generational wound begins to loosen. The empath eventually discovers that closure rarely comes from other people. The apology may never arrive. The understanding may never come. The person who hurt you may continue living untouched by the damage they caused. And this breaks something inside the empath at first. But later, it frees you. Because healing begins the moment your peace no longer depends on someone else's awareness. Deep down, the empath was never weak for repeating emotional lessons. You simply loved with an open heart in a world where many people love from unhealed wounds. But eventually the soul becomes tired of bleeding in the same places. The patterns become visible. The intuition becomes undeniable. The loneliness of self-abandonment becomes heavier than the fear of letting go. And that is when the empath changes. Quietly, completely, not by becoming colder, but by finally realizing that protecting your peace is also a form of love. The empath often stays trapped inside emotional memories because feeling deeply becomes a way of keeping people alive internally. You replay conversations, moments, tiny gestures no one else would even remember. And somewhere inside, the soul believes that if it stops feeling everything, it will lose the connection completely. So you keep reopening old wounds just to feel close to what once mattered. There is also a hidden fear many empaths carry. The fear that without suffering, love will disappear. Because pain became proof of attachment. Sacrifice became proof of loyalty. Endurance became proof of devotion. But healthy love does not ask the empath to bleed constantly to prove the heart is real. Real love does not require emotional self-destruction as an offering. The empath keeps repeating lessons because the heart tries to rewrite old emotional endings. You meet people who resemble the same emotional energy from the past. Distant, inconsistent, emotionally confusing, and unconsciously hope this time the story will end differently. This time they will stay. This time they will choose you fully. This time your love will finally be enough. But healing begins when the empath understands that closure is not rewriting the past through new people. Sometimes the deepest wound of the empath is not abandonment by others. It is self-abandonment. Every time intuition whispered leave, and you stayed. Every time your body felt unsafe, but your empathy overruled it. Every time your spirit needed rest, but you kept pouring into people who only consumed you emotionally. The lesson repeats until the empath realizes that betraying yourself creates pain no relationship can heal. Then something sacred begins to happen. The empath stops chasing explanations, stops romanticizing mixed signals, stops confusing emotional hunger with soul connection. And suddenly, people who once felt irresistible begin to feel heavy. The nervous system no longer mistakes anxiety for chemistry. The soul no longer calls suffering destiny. This is the quiet rebirth no one sees at first. Carl Jung believed that enlightenment does not come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. And this is the empath's true journey. Not becoming endlessly kind, not endlessly giving, but finally seeing the unconscious wounds that kept choosing pain in different forms. The empath was never repeating lessons because the soul was cursed. The lessons repeated because awareness was trying to be born. And maybe that is the finale hidden inside all this pain. The empath eventually understands that life was never punishing you with the same lesson. Life was guiding you back to yourself again and again, until you finally listened. One day, you stopped chasing unavailable people. Stop begging for clarity. Stop shrinking your spirit to earn temporary love. And in that moment, the cycle ends quietly. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with something the empath searched for in everyone else for years: inner peace. If this message found you at the right moment, leave a comment and share which emotional lesson changed you the most. And if you're walking the path of healing, awakening, and deeper self-understanding, subscribe to the channel. There are still truths your soul may be waiting to hear. Thank you for watching.